associated with significant disability. Like US, there's 110 million disability days per year in the US population. And that means like it's decreased work performance, it's increased medical resource use, it's increased risk for coronary events.
Is this per person has on average 110 disability
Yeah,
days?
the whole US. Like that's how many people take days out of work because of their anxiety. It can be very disabling, and they're not
Okay.
performing good at work, and they're going to the doctors more, and things
So
like that.
there's a couple questions I have. But with that, I did want to I did want to talk about kind of the other side of it that I've seen. I've experienced it personally where um I'm very anxious about a specific task at work,
Hmm.
and I'm not calling off of work or anything, but what I'll do, unfortunately, I've never gotten to the point where, I'm late on things, but
Hmm.
what I'll do is I'll sit in front of my computer with the intent to start it, and then I'm so anxious and I'll find something else that I can do now, which isn't as important, but it's something else that I can do. Is there is there a way to measure that? Because I feel like that everybody has experienced on some level or another, uh, a few times a year at least.
Yeah. Well, one way you can go about it is to ask yourself, what is okay, here, this is what I'm worried about. And then next question, like Socratic question, the next question would be, okay, what if this happened? What would be the worst outcome if it actually happened? What would be the most likely outcome if it happened? And you can rate your anxious thoughts from a scale of 1 to 10. Because these thoughts are usually automatic thoughts, which are just below our subconscious, and they're just intrusive thoughts that just come into your mind. And you're not even really aware of them sometimes because you just accept them as truth. Um, and then going back to the questioning, at the very end of those questions, you'll ask yourself, will this matter in one day, 1 week, or a year, or 1 month? How much is this really going to affect my life? Because anxiety does play a role in our life. It helps us be alert to danger or fears, to keep us safe, because then we'll do safety seeking. Um, it can motivate us to get started on something because we don't, because you don't want to be late. So you're like, okay, I'm going to just do it. And then I won't be anxious anymore once I do it. So there's motivation to decrease our actually tackling the task.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like um, anxiety plays a very important survival role. I was reading a an article that was saying that I think it was 7 times more likely to identify something that could impact us negatively than something that could impact us positively, and that's normal basically because we want to, um, as a survival mechanism, we want to recognize danger most immediately. Like that has to take primacy in our heads of what
For
is
sure.
most important. So, well, a couple things, but in in my head, I feel like part of anxiety is seeing the world as presenting much more danger than it does. And I feel like in that regard, a lot of people suffer in some way from heightened anxiety. Um, because I know a ton of people who uh, are very stressed out about the world and just everything going on.
Right. And there, I'm going to get into like core beliefs in a few minutes, which is a cognitive behavioral concept. But a lot of people have these automatic thoughts that they feel anxious about themselves, others, and the world. So like about themselves, maybe they're like, "Oh, I'm so incompetent, I can't do this thing at work," or others that like they're dangerous. like everyone else is dangerous or untrustworthy, you know, and then the world could also be like, you know, it's a really dangerous place. I don't want to go outside, or I don't want to travel or do anything. I don't want to interact with other people because people are dangerous. So you have these, you know, kind of those different factors. Um, and then one thing that's really effective, and it's a fundamental part of treating GAD, is you keep a thought record. So journaling is really good. And then a thought record, which is where you write out your thought and then you rank it on from 1 to 10, how anxious it makes you. Then you write down a thought that supports that and a thought that contradicts it. And then what's most likely causing it. And I give thought records to clients all the time. And it's kind of interesting to see. It's very interesting actually, and it's really helpful to see what they wrote out. Because a lot of times it's more than they're saying in therapy.
So I think this is so interesting, and it's also kind of serendipitous in a way, because I was talking about how I was reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius not too long ago, and the reason for that is that I went into kind of a Stoic philosophy rabbit hole where I was reading, you know, different Stoic philosophers,
Mm-hmm.
and the core of the philosophy is essentially breaking down thoughts into logical bits to
Mm-hmm.
get to kind of correct conclusions. And it seems like a lot of what you're talking about involves that.
Yeah, and you know, as I mentioned earlier, cognitive behavioral therapy, you know, it's the treatment of choice, and it has a lot of focus on what we call core beliefs, which is, you know, these beliefs that we are deeply held. We just take them as true, and they're usually developed in childhood or adolescence based on our experience, and it's the lens through which we see the world. Um, and to change them can be really hard because you have to like figure out, okay, this is the core belief. Where did it come from? Like, was it an experience you had as a child, or something someone said to you, or, you know, like, what is it? And then to change it, you really have to examine whether it's true or not, and, you know, like, what's a rational thought? Um, because a lot of times, you know, people will just think, you know, like, okay, my core belief is I'm a failure. I fail at everything. Well, is it because you only pay attention to the things that don't go well? And there's other things that go well and you totally discount, or, you know, ask yourself questions along those lines. So, um, I was going to talk briefly about differential diagnosis. So, which is just ruling out other disorders. And so, social anxiety is another anxiety disorder. And it's, I mentioned earlier, with especially with like adolescents and stuff, but not only with adolescents. You know, people have a performance anxiety, and it's fixated on like upcoming social events in which they'll be evaluated, or, you know, like maybe they're going to meet new people and they're like, oh, they're going to hate me, or they're going to think I have a bad outfit on, or whatever it is. um, and then that's distinct from separation anxiety, where you worry excessively only about separation from an attachment figure. That's all it is. You don't have other worries. And then there's panic disorder, which have enough panic attacks and then have really significant behavioral change. That would be panic disorder. Otherwise, you can just diagnose like a GAD with panic attacks. But panic disorder rises to a whole other level where you're just basically immobilized because you're having these panic attacks all the time. And then OCD, a lot of people when they're anxious will be like, oh, I'm so OCD. And that's not true. I mean, I guess with a couple people it could be true, but just because you're anxious all the time does not mean you have OCD. OCD is obsessive compulsive disorder. So you have to have these repeated thoughts, um, and like obsessions or inappropriate ideas about stuff. And like, say you, like, I can't leave the house until I check the stove 45 times. And then you do that action because that decreases your anxiety about what if you left the house and the stove was on and it caught fire and all this other bad stuff happened. So OCD always involves the behaviors to combat the thoughts. So that's a little different.
It's so interesting that anxiety can happen any given moment in terms of just thinking about your past, your present, or the future. It's just mind blowing that I had never thought about it like that. It was just like, okay, I know what's coming up, so there's a reason for me to be anxiety, but
Yeah.
not the fact of, oh, if I think about too much of my past, I'm going to get into that rabbit hole of having that anxious feeling that I'm about to get.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. It is, you can, like you said, you can still worry about things from the past. And what if that's going to happen again? Or, that was so terrible. And I was embarrassed because I like froze up when I was giving a presentation or, so it's kind of like primary and secondary emotions where say the primary one would have been anxiety and then, feeling depressed because of your anxiety, like that would be the secondary emotion or mad because you're anxious. So those are
mhm.
two different emotions about the same event.
Yeah.
So
um,
that kind of brings me to something that I think becomes as we do this podcast, as I explore more into psychology and uh, clinical psychology, that is something that I keep running into, and that is that it seems like nothing exists on an island. Like nobody has just anxiety. There's anxiety, and then here's some other things that led into it, and that's the primary symptom, or that's the primary, like this is the biggest issue, but there's more that is always underneath it. And you were
there's a
talking
huge
about
overlap between depression and anxiety, huge overlap. Like there, if you did like one of those Venn diagrams, there'd be the overlap is huge.
and you were talking about how if somebody has PTSD, like PTSD kind of takes primacy over the anxiety, but anxiety is always a part of it. And I
Yeah.
think that um, to me, that's a very important and distinct nuance between mental health and physical health. And I feel like part of the reason why a lot of people choose to shirk their mental health when they wouldn't shirk their physical health
Right.
is because, like, if I have a cold, I have a cold. I can take some cold medicine and then the cold goes away. But if I have anxiety, there's more to it. There's more work that I have to
Absolutely.
do personally,
Yeah.
and it's work for, my clinician, be it a psychiatrist, psychologist, therapist, whatever it is. And I feel like a lot of people look at it and they go, that's a whole lot of work, and I have my coping mechanisms. I don't know if they're consciously saying I have my coping mechanisms, but they're saying I
I
can figure
do.
it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they kind of say, "Oh, that's not, like, I'm just going to ignore it." Uh, but that leads me into finally the question of it. What is the what is the life difference you see for people that get their anxiety treated?
Like how does their life change? Okay. Well, I think they have lifestyle changes in a major way. Maybe, they're not drinking as much because they would drink to like quell their anxiety. Or, they're getting out of the house and exercising or, interacting with people more, which is, we're social people. It's good for us and healthy for us to interact with others if they're the right people, I guess. Um, and to not be like tense all the time and improve your sleep and um, a lot of other cognitive symptoms like you'll be more focused at work, you won't be as irritable. So there's a lot of overall life changes that happen when your anxiety level goes down. Let's see. So in terms of, I touched a little bit on this before, but um, you can do like mindfulness treatment, you can do progressive muscle relaxation, deep breathing exercises. Those all help treat it. And then with cognitive behavioral therapy, you just become aware of your automatic thoughts, and you can challenge them, like I kind of touched on before. You can challenge them and then be like, okay, that's not always true. Um, there's something called cognitive distortions, which they're also called thinking errors, and they're a very prevalent aspect of GAD. Some of them are all or none thinking, which is when you don't see the middle ground. Overgeneralization, when you extrapolate to your future based on a single event. There's minimizing and maximizing, which is when you discount your accomplishments and inflate your failures or errors. Fortune telling is like jumping to conclusions. And then I really think people do this all the time. It's emotional reasoning, where they accept, I feel this way, therefore it is. Our emotions aren't facts, they're far from it. And just because you feel upset about something doesn't make it a threat to you or mean that it really even happened in that way that maybe you're perceiving it.
Hi everyone, I'm Allie Bailey, and now a quick word from us.
Howie Mandel here. Do you ever feel like you're just another ticket in a long line, especially when you're looking for help with something as personal as your own mental health? Lamco Wellness is bringing the human connection back to mental health care. It starts with a personalized intake process where they get to know you. They offer medication management that's actually managed, coordinating with you and your clinician to make sure you're both empowered and on the right track. It comes down to three things: personal connection, compassion, and absolute privacy. Stop being another number and head over to lamcowellness.com to take the first step.
All right, everybody, now let's get back to the podcast.
One is catastrophizing, and that's when you predict the future negatively without any evidence to support it. So,
I feel like um, our, I guess, IT ridden, internet filled world is, to me anyway, I think an amplifier for anxiety. I feel like a lot of the symptoms and the things you're talking about, I have seen increase as we become increasingly connected online.
yeah.
Um, I that could just entirely be in my head. I could just be a online bad, grumpy old man, but uh, it also, I don't think I'm wrong. I don't feel I'm wrong. I have zero evidence of that. But it does seem like I see more people exhibiting these symptoms in the past, 20-ish years. Um, do you think, or is there any evidence to suggest that anxiety has been on the rise because of
Social media.
the internet, basically?
Yeah. I don't know the answer to that. Um, I guess would be it probably is related to a certain extent. Um, and then especially like, with kids and adolescents with the bullying that like, so you're at school getting bullied, then you go home and you're getting bullied. You can't escape it. It's like 24 hours a day. Which would, I'm sure, make someone really anxious to go to school. And I mean, there's just one example where it's, I think, very interwoven with the internet because, or, text messaging, people just, I mean, I've seen some of the text messages that people will send, their peers, and it's awful. It's really not very positive at all. And it's creating a huge amount of anxiety in these kids and adolescents. So,
I mean, I'm going to get up on my soapbox about mental health, but I think that is why, for, I would say, everybody, mental health is so important. And even if it's just, hey, doing a check-in with a clinician to see where you stand, because I know I personally never recognize what's going on with me until somebody tells me. And
mhm.
then I'm like, oh, this is what's going on, and I can start to take steps to improve it. Um, and I feel like a lot of us are like that. Maybe I'm alone on that, but I feel like a lot of us are like that.
Yeah.
But it's also